part of the Press Play Podcast Network.
Hello and welcome to the Full 40 College Basketball Podcast on the Press Play Podcast Network. I'm your host, Ben Billman, and we have a loaded episode today. In the first half, I'm going to take you through the college basketball teams that are absolute locks for the NCAA tournament. And in the second half, I'm going to run through the bubble teams and explain exactly what those teams need to do in order to make the NCAA tournament, with Selection Sunday coming up in just over a week. So we are at the best time of the year in college basketball. Some conference tournaments have already begun. Some will start next week. And once conference tournaments are all going on, it becomes chaos in the world of college basketball, and teams really start to see where they're going to fit in the tournament or if they're going to make the tournament at all. So in the first half today, I'm going to take a look at the teams that are absolute locks. And what that means is that no matter what happens to close out the regular season or what happens in the conference tournaments these teams are in, their seeding might change a little bit based on how they do the last few weeks or the last few games of their season, but their status as a team being in is not going to change. So I'm going to go conference by conference through the major conferences and let you know which teams will be in based on what they've done so far this season. So starting in the American Athletic Conference, the only team that is an absolute lock right now is Florida Atlantic. They sit at number 34 in the net rankings. They have an overall record of 23-7. They're 8-5 in quad 1 and 2 games, which means that those are the best teams that they're playing at home, on the road, or in neutral sites. 8-5 in those games. They do have 2 quad 4 losses, which look really bad, but overall, having played 13 games in quads 1 and 2 is what is going to do it to get them into the NCAA tournament. Florida Atlantic, the first team that is a lock for March Madness. In the ACC, I have 4 teams that are locks. First one being number 9, Duke. Number 9 in the net rankings, 24-6 overall. 11-6 in quads 1 and 2. And they have 0 bad losses, which would be considered quad 3 or 4 losses. They have none of those. Duke is an automatic lock for the tournament, as well as number 10 North Carolina also sits at 24-6, 12-6 in quads 1 and 2, and 0 quad 3 or 4 losses. The Tar Heels are an automatic lock. Number 24, Clemson in the net rankings, 21-9 overall, 10 quad 1 and 2 wins. They do have 2 quad 3 losses, but overall they've played 17 quad 1 and 2 teams, and that strength of schedule is going to be enough to get them in. And finally, number 50, Virginia. Now that ranking of number 50 doesn't sound very high, but what they have going for them is that they have played 17 games against quad 1 and 2. They're 8-9 in those games with an overall record of 21-9 and 0 quad 3 or 4 losses. So even though their net ranking is very low, their strength of schedule and their lack of bad losses gets them into the tournament. So 4 teams from the ACC that are automatic locks. In the Atlantic 10, number 21 in the net rankings, Dayton. Dayton is a lock. They're 23-6 overall, 8-6 in quads 1 and 2, 0 bad losses on the year. There's no way Dayton is going to be left out of this tournament. The Big 12, the toughest conference in America, has 9 teams that I see as absolute locks heading into the conference tournament next week. We'll start at the top with number 1, Houston. Houston is 27-3 overall. They're 15-3 in quads 1 and 2 with 0 bad losses, and so they're going to be an automatic lock and more than likely an automatic lock for a number 1 seed on Selection Sunday. Number 8, Iowa State at 24-6. They are 12-6 in quad 1, 0 bad losses. They're an automatic lock. Number 12, BYU, 21-9 overall, 9-9 in quads 1 and 2, 0 bad losses. They have done a great job of moving in and shifting in to the Big 12 with very little letdown in their first year in the Big 12. Number 13, Baylor, 21-8 overall, 13-8 in quads 1 and 2. Again, 0 bad losses. Scott Drew has that program heading back to the tournament. Number 15, Kansas, 21-8 overall, 12-7 in quads 1 and 2. They do have 1 quad 3 loss, but that is not going to be enough to keep them out of the tournament. They are in as well. Number 28, Texas, 19-11 overall. Not the best Q1 and Q2 record of 6-10, but just the fact that they've played 16 quad 1 and quad 2 games over half of their schedule is impressive enough, and the fact that they only have 1 Q3 loss is very impressive as well. I have Texas in no matter what happens. Number 37, Texas Tech. At 21-9, they are 7-9 in quad 1 and 2. Again, not the most impressive overall record, but 16 games against quad 1 and 2 is very difficult, and they have 0 bad losses. Number 38, Texas Christian, TCU, sits at 20-10. Again, not the best quad 1 and 2 record at 7-10. But again, 17 games against quads 1 and 2 is highly impressive, and 0 bad losses for TCU. Number 41, Oklahoma. The Sooners are a lock for me as well. They are also 20-10 overall. They are 9-10 in quads 1 and 2. 19 of their 30 games have been in quads 1 and 2. And 9 of those 19 games have been victories. And they also have 0 bad losses. So overall, the Big 12 has 9 teams that I have locked in to the NCAA tournament. In the second half, I'll discuss a handful of teams, not just from the Big 12, but from across the country that are on the bubble. And one of those teams will come from the Big 12, which could mean that if the Big 12 gets very fortunate, it's possible they could have 10 teams and maybe even 11, but I'll speak more to that in the second half. In the Big East, one of the toughest conferences to figure out right now based on the standings and where they are. So this is going to be a bubble-heavy conference, but there are 3 teams that I have as absolute locks in the NCAA tournament as of today. The first one is number 3 overall, Connecticut. Connecticut sits at 27-3. They have played 20 games in quads 1 and 2, going 17-3 in those games, 0 bad losses. Along with Houston, more than likely, they are going to be a number 1 seed no matter what happens leading up to Selection Sunday. Number 11, Creighton at 22-8. They are 14-8 in quads 1 and 2, having played 22 games in quads 1 and 2 of their 30 overall. They have 0 bad losses as well, So Creighton is a lock. Number 14, Marquette. Marquette coming off a loss to Connecticut the other night, but still at 22-8, 12-8 in quads 1 and 2 with 0 bad losses. It doesn't matter. You're going to see Marquette in your bracket in March. You can mark that down. So in the Big East, I have 3 teams that are absolute locks, and there are a number of bubble teams that I will talk about in the second half from the Big East. In the Big Ten, I have 6 locks in the Big Ten for teams that will absolutely make it to the NCAA tournament. First of all, Purdue, who is at number 2 in the net rankings, 27-3 overall, 17-3 in quad 1s and 2, and 0 bad losses. Along with Houston and Connecticut, I would be absolutely shocked if Purdue did not receive a number 1 seed. I think Purdue, Houston, and Connecticut are going to be 1, 2, and 3 in some sort of order on Selection Sunday, and they are a lock, and they've already sealed up the Big Ten regular season title. Number 16, Illinois at 22-8, 10-8 in quads 1 and 2 with 0 bad losses. Illinois is another team that will be in March Madness. Number 22, Michigan State. They do not have the best record overall. They are only 18-12, but considering that 21 of their 30 games have been in quads 1 and 2, and that they have won 9 of those games, they're 9-12 with 0 bad losses. They are in mainly because of their strength of schedule. Michigan State is not the same team as they've been the past few years or in the Tom Izzo era, but they have done enough and have played enough of a tough schedule to be a lock in the tournament. Number 23, Wisconsin. Wisconsin, 18-11 overall. Of those games, 23 of them have been in quads 1 and 2, and they have a winning record of 12-11 in those games. They have faded a little bit at the end of the year, but still that strength of schedule and that overall record, along with the fact that they have 0 bad losses, gets Wisconsin in. At number 43, Nebraska, 21-9 overall, 7-9 in quads 1 and 2. Again, not the most impressive record, but they also don't have any bad losses. So that's what saves Nebraska there, is a strong strength of schedule and 0 bad losses. And then finally in the Big Ten, the 6th team that I think is a lock is Northwestern. They are number 53 in the net rankings with an overall record of 20-10. They have won 10 quad 1 and 2 games with a record of 10-9 in those quads. They do have a quad 4 loss, but they make up for that with the amount of quality wins overall. So Northwestern is the last of 6 teams I have as locks in the Big Ten. In the Mountain West Conference, now this one was a little bit more tricky. I've seen a lot of other podcasts and articles. Not everyone has all these teams as locks, but I do. So I have a little bit more faith in the Mountain West than maybe some other people do. But as of right now, I have 6 teams that I have as locks going in to March Madness in the Mountain West Conference. The first one being number 19 in the net rankings, San Diego State. Overall, they're 20-8 on the year, 9-8 in quads 1 and 2, and 0 bad losses overall. They're an absolute lock to make it. Number 25 in the net rankings, Boise State, 19-9 overall, 8-8 in quads 1 and 2, with 1 quad 3 loss, which would be considered not the best loss. But when you only have one of those, it doesn't take away from the strength you've had overall. Number 26, New Mexico at 21-8. They are 6-6 in quads 1 and 2. They do have 1 quad 3 loss and 1 quad 4 loss, but the overall number of wins that they have right now at 21, along with their 6-6 record in quads 1 and 2, I put them in as a lock. I know some people still have them on the bubble, but I'm going to lock them in because of their overall record. At number 32, Utah State at 23-5 overall, 8-5 in quads 1 and 2, and 0 bad losses. Utah State will be in March Madness. Number 33, Nevada, 24-6 overall, 8-5 in quads 1 and 2. They do have a quad 3 loss, but again, overall, with the 24 wins overall, the overall number of wins is going to push them into the bracket. And then finally, Colorado State, number 35, with a record of 19-9, 8-8 in quads 1 and 2, and 1 quad 3 loss. Again, a high-quality schedule, 16 games of the 28 they've played so far that have been in quads 1 and 2. The strength of schedule gets them in, along with the 8 wins that are quality at the top. So the Mountain West I have with 6 teams in heading into conference tournament play. All right, the Pac-12, and again, this is the last year for the Pac-12, and it's not looking that great right now. I only have 2 teams in the Pac-12 as locks to make March Madness. The first being number 4, Arizona. 23-6 overall, 13-5 in quads 1 and 2, but they do have a quad 3 loss. So the difference for them between the top 3 of Purdue, Houston, and Connecticut is that quad 3 loss and not quite as many quad 1 and 2 wins. Arizona is an absolute lock, though, and I think if they win the Pac-12 tournament, they more than likely will be the 4th number 1 seed. That is yet to remain next week, so we will see what happens there. And then also in the Pac-12, number 40 Washington State has an overall record of 23-7. They are 9-6 in quads 1 and 2 with 1 quad 3 loss. Their overall win total, along with the fact that they've won 9 quad 1 and 2 games, that is going to push them in, and they've had an amazing year. One of the biggest sleepers, I think, heading into March Madness. Okay. In the Southeastern Conference, the SEC, I have 7 teams that are automatic locks for March Madness. Starting at the top with number 5, Tennessee. Overall, 24-6. They're 13-6 in quads 1 and 2 with 0 bad losses. And between them and Arizona, I think there's a very tight argument right now about which one deserves that 4th number 1 seed. That will all be decided next week during the conference tournaments. Number 6, Auburn, 23-7 overall, 10-7 in quads 1 and 2 with 0 bad losses. They're going to be a tough team in March as well. Number 7, Alabama, 20-10 overall, 11-10 in quads 1 and 2 with 0 bad losses. So even though they have a high amount of losses, double-digit losses, the reason they're number 7 is because of the strength of schedule that they have played. At number 20, Kentucky is a lock, 22-8 overall, 7-7 in quads 1 and 2. They do have 1 quad 3 loss, but overall that record is going to secure a spot in March Madness. Number 27, Florida, 21-9 overall, 7-9 in quads 1 and 2 with 0 bad losses. Again, the total number of wins along with the strength of schedule, having played 16 Q1 and Q2 games, gets them in. Number 39, Mississippi State at 19-11, only 7-10 in quads 1 and 2, but considering 17 of their 30 games have been in quads 1 and 2, that strength of schedule gets them in. They do have 1 quad 4 loss, but overall they should be safe. And then finally in the SEC, number 47, South Carolina, 24-6 overall, 10-4 in quads 1 and 2, with 2 quad 3 losses. Not quite as many quad 1 and quad 2 games as other teams, but that 10-4 record in those games is very impressive. And then finally, the last 2 teams, the West Coast Conference, they have 2 teams that are locks. First of all, number 17, Gonzaga, 23-6 overall, 6-6 in quads 1 and 2, including 3 quad 1 wins, which was what was holding them back for a while, but they have stepped that up and gotten a few big quad 1 wins in the past month or so. They have 0 bad losses. It would be a travesty to keep Gonzaga out of this tournament with the way they have played over the last month of the season. And then number 18, St. Mary's, with an overall record of 23-7. They are 7-5 in quads 1 and 2. They do have 2 quad 3 losses, but overall with that record, with the strength of schedule, and with the fact that they have split with Gonzaga so far this year, I think St. Mary's is an absolute lock to make it to the NCAA tournament. So those are my teams that I think are in no matter what happens the rest of the year. Now in the second half, I'm going to be going through the bubble teams who still have a chance, but I'm going to be talking about what they need to do in order to make the NCAA tournament and lock up a bid to March Madness. I will be right back.
Hi, everybody. It's John Tellage from the Guardians of the Land MLB podcast. Be sure to hop on with us to follow all the dramatic developments of the reigning American League Central Division champions. From game analysis to interviews to keeping tabs on who could be the next breakout star. We'll have that and much, much more right here. It's the Guardians of the Land MLB podcast on the Press Play Podcast Network. Subscribe here and join the fun.
Hey everybody, it's Sam Amico from Cavs on the Break NBA podcast. Be sure to give us a listen for all your Cleveland Cavaliers recaps, analysis, breakdowns, draft talk, free agency. The list goes on and on. Give us a listen, Cavs on the Break NBA podcast.
Welcome back to the second half of the Full 40 College Basketball Podcast on the Press Play Podcast Network. So in the first half, we went over every single team that I believe is a lock for the NCAA tournament, with only just over a week to go before Selection Sunday. In this second half, I'm going to go through conference by conference and spell out which teams are on the bubble, which means they may not be in right now, but depending on what they do over the next week and a half, they can work their way in or play their way out, depending on what happens. So if you did not hear your team in the first half and you don't hear it here in the second half, that means, in my opinion, the only way that your team is going to make the NCAA tournament is if they get the automatic bid by winning their conference tournament. So I'm sorry in advance if your team is not in this episode, but that's just the reality at this point. We are down to the last few games, and at this point, I think most teams know what they have to do to make it to the NCAA tournament. But let's go through team by team, conference by conference, and we're going to start in the American Athletic Conference. There are 2 teams that I think still have a chance to make it to the NCAA tournament without having to win the conference tournament. The first being Memphis. Memphis was one of the hottest teams throughout the season. At one point, they were in the top 15, snuck into the top 10 at one point. A very strong start, but they faded late in conference play, and now they sit at number 70 in the net rankings. They do have a lot working for them, though. They have played 12 quad 1 and 2 games and have gone 6-6 in those games. And they have a huge game coming up this weekend against Florida Atlantic. That is an absolute must-win for a team that I have as a lock heading into that game in Florida Atlantic. I think Memphis needs to win that game, and they probably need to make it to the American Athletic Conference Tournament Championship game to get in. But if they do that, I can't see the committee leaving them out with a solid run and a good finish to their season. So Memphis beat Florida Atlantic, make it to the AAC Championship game, and you should feel pretty good about your chances heading into Selection Sunday. The other team is South Florida, and this is one of the hardest decisions to make with South Florida. They have absolutely dominated in the American Athletic Conference this year. They lead the conference by multiple games. They're 23-5 overall. But the problem with them is that they have 2 quad 4 losses, which look really bad on their schedule. South Florida at 23-5 overall, it's going to be very difficult for the committee to leave them out. But I think South Florida needs to beat Tulsa this weekend in their last regular season game, and more than likely needs to make a run all the way to the conference tournament championship. If they do that and the committee leaves them out, there are going to be a lot of frustrated and angry people and analysts that follow college basketball. So South Florida has some work to do, but I think they will get in if they beat Tulsa and make a deep run in the American Athletic Conference tournament. And that's it for the AAC. Florida Atlantic a lock, and Memphis and South Florida who have a chance to work their way in. All right, moving on to the ACC. There are 2 teams in the ACC that as of right now I would not have in, but they can still work their way in depending on how they do the rest of the year. The first being number 42 Wake Forest. Overall, they're 18-12 with a 7-11 record in quads 1 and 2. They have faded late though, with multiple losses in a row over the last few weeks. They get a big game against Clemson this weekend. They have to beat Clemson, and then they probably need at least 2 wins in the ACC tournament to feel comfortable to get a bid in the NCAA tournament. So beat Clemson, get 2 tournament wins, and you should be good to go. The other team, number 44 Pittsburgh, 20-10 overall, 7-8 in quads 1 and 2. They do have 2 quad 3 losses. They play North Carolina State this weekend, which isn't going to move the needle too much, but you cannot lose that game. You need to beat North Carolina State, and you need 2 or 3 ACC tournament wins to be in consideration for the NCAA tournament. It's going to be a tough road for Pittsburgh, but I do still see a path there if they beat NC State and get at least 2 wins in the conference tournament. Moving on to the Big 12. As I mentioned in the first half, the Big 12 has 9 teams, in my opinion, that are absolute locks for the tournament. But there are also 2 teams on the outskirts right now that I think still have a chance to get in as an at-large bid if they do certain things here down the stretch. The first being number 45, Cincinnati, 45th in the net rankings. Their record overall is not that impressive. They are 17-13, only 5-11 in quads 1 and 2, and they do have 2 quad 3 losses. But they have a major chance in the Big 12 tournament. First of all, beat West Virginia in your last regular season game. If you can win 2 or 3 games against high-quality quad 1 and 2 competition in the Big 12 tournament, that could get them up to 7 or 8 quad 1 and 2 wins. And now we're talking about Cincinnati as a potential at-large candidate. More than likely, they're going to need to make the Big 12 championship game, though, to begin that discussion. Similar with Kansas State, number 77 in the net rankings, not the best overall, 17-13 overall record, but they are 7-13 in quads 1 and 2. So that means two things. First of all, 20 games that they've played against quality opponents, and then they also have 0 bad losses. They have a huge game against Iowa State this weekend. If they can beat Iowa State and then make a push of 2 or 3 wins in the Big 12 tournament, I think Kansas State will get in as well. That could push their quad 1 and 2 win total to 10, which would put them above a lot of other bubble teams when it comes to overall quality wins. So the Big 12 has 9 locks with 2 more teams that would need a miracle, but I think they could make a push for an at-large bid depending on what they do the last few days of the season. The Big East is the biggest conundrum in all of college basketball right now. I have 5 teams that have yet to lock themselves into March Madness, but still have a chance even if they don't win the Big East tournament. The first one is number 29, Villanova. Villanova has a pretty poor record overall of 17-13, but they do have 10 quad 1 and 2 wins, but they also have 3 quad 3 losses. It's one of the most bizarre resumes out there right now. The biggest thing they have going for them is that they have Creighton as their last regular season game, and they probably need to win that and at least one game in the Big East tournament. I think if they do that, beat Creighton and win one game in the Big East tournament, or if you lose to Creighton, you probably need to win 2 games in the Big East tournament to get in as an at-large bid. Number 36, St. John's, another team that has been confusing all year. 18-12 overall, 9-11 in quads 1 and 2. They do have 1 quad 3 loss, so that doesn't look good on their resume. They played Georgetown in their last game of the regular season. That is an absolute must-win for St. John's. They cannot lose to a team like Georgetown and expect to get in as an at-large. So I think they need to beat Georgetown and win at least one game in the Big East tournament to get in. If they do that, that would get them to 20 wins, and I feel pretty good that that team makes it to the NCAA tournament by beating Georgetown and getting 1 win in the conference tournament. Number 61, Providence. Again, a pretty high net ranking, not the best overall, but they have played 18 quad 1 and 2 games with a 7-11 record. They get the ultimate opportunity in their last game of the regular season against Connecticut. A win against Connecticut would basically seal them in as a lock in the NCAA tournament. But a loss to Connecticut, and they probably need to win 2 or maybe even 3 Big East tournament games to make it. So Providence has a huge opportunity here this weekend against UConn. At number 63, Seton Hall, 19-11 overall. They've played 19 quads 1 and 2 games, going 9-10 in those games. They're looking pretty good, but they played DePaul in their last game of the regular season. This is an absolute must-win for Seton Hall. A loss to DePaul would look very, very poor on their resume, but they need to beat DePaul. They probably need to win at least one Big East tournament game to feel absolutely comfortable getting into March Madness. And then finally, number 65, Butler. Butler has fallen apart a little bit here over the last few weeks, but at 17-13, 8-13 in quads 1 and 2, if they can somehow make a run to the Big East championship game, I think they have to be considered as a potential at-large bid, even if they don't win that. They have to hope, too, that if they make that run to the Big East Championship game, that some of the higher-ranking teams they're playing against on that road, that would definitely help out their quads 1 and 2 wins. That could push it to double digits. They have 8 right now in quads 1 and 2. That could push them to 10 or more. That's what Butler needs at this point to make it. All right, moving on to the Big Ten. I have 2 teams in the Big Ten that still have a chance to make it, even though they're not in right now. The first one being number 57, Iowa. Iowa has made a late push as a bubble team here over the last few weeks. They sit at 18-12 overall. They have played 19 games in quads 1 and 2 with a record of 8-11. The biggest thing they have going for them, they play Illinois in their last game of the regular season. Beat Illinois and win a Big Ten tournament game, I think Iowa is getting in. That would push them to 20 wins on the year. That would push them to over double digits in quads 1 and 2. I think they get in at that point. If they don't beat Illinois, they probably need to win 2 or 3 Big Ten tournament games to be considered as an at-large. And then finally, Ohio State, number 59 overall. It's been a wild ride for the Buckeyes after firing their coach, bringing in an interim coach, and yet somehow sitting at 18-12 overall. I still think if they can beat Rutgers in their last game of the regular season and make a run to the Big Ten championship game, I could see Ohio State sneaking in, probably one of the last 3 or 4 teams to make it, but they need 3 or 4 more wins overall to be in that discussion for an at-large bid. Moving on to the Mountain West Conference, I had 6 teams as locks in the Mountain West, but there is one sneaky good team out there that really wasn't on anybody's radar about a month and a half ago, and they've come out of nowhere to be in the top half of that conference, and that is UNLV. Right now, definitely not the strongest numbers, number 76 in the net rankings, 17-10 overall. They have played 13 quad 1 and 2 games, going 6-7 in those games. The thing that's holding them back is that they have 3 quad 4 losses. So here's what UNLV needs to do. First of all, they play Nevada in the last game of their regular season. That is an absolute must win. If you lose that, your chances in an at-large are gone. But if you beat Nevada and then you pull off a couple more wins and make it to the Mountain West Conference Championship game, that would get you to 8 or 9 quad 1 and 2 wins. And now it's going to be very difficult to keep UNLV out if they're able to accomplish that. It's a very narrow road for UNLV, but how they've played over the last few weeks, it's not impossible. In the Missouri Valley Conference, Indiana State and Drake, they're basically both in the same boat when it comes to making it as an at-large. First of all, I hope both of them make it because I think the more mid-majors we get in the tournament, the better. But Indiana State, number 30 in the net rankings. They are 5-4 in quad 1, but I think if they lose early in their conference tournament, more than likely they are not going to make it. They need to make a push to the Missouri Valley Championship game and hope that it's a close game against the other bubble team, Drake. I think both those teams need to make it to the championship and have it be a close game for both of them to get in. Drake is number 48 right now at 24-6 and 5-4 in quad 1 and 2. They do have 2 quad 3 losses. Indiana State has a little bit better chance as an at-large, but I think if Drake can make it to the conference championship and drop a close one to Indiana State, they might have an argument to get in. Moving on to the Pac-12. The Pac-12 is going to clear itself up this weekend. Number 31 Colorado, number 46 Utah, and number 66 Oregon. They all have 2 regular season games left, and they're all playing against each other in 1 or 2 of those games over the weekend. For instance, Colorado still has to play Oregon, Utah still plays Oregon, and again, Oregon plays both Colorado and Utah. So, I will wait on the Pac-12 to give my determination because I think a lot of it will be figured out this weekend. But at this point, if I'm any of those teams, I would advise them to win their last 2 regular season games and win at least 1 game in the Pac-12 tournament to feel safe. If any of those 3 teams do that, then I would put them in as an almost lock to be the 3rd team out of the Pac-12. In the Southeastern Conference, the SEC, number 49, Texas A&M, 17-13 overall, but what they have going for them is that they've played 19 quad 1 and 2 games and gone 10-9 in those games. They get Ole Miss in the last regular season game of the year, who is also on the bubble at number 78. The winner of that game probably needs to win 1 or 2 SEC tournament games. The loser of that game more than likely would need to win the SEC tournament to get in. So Texas A&M and Ole Miss play this weekend. That is the ultimate bubble burster game in the SEC. And then finally, 2 teams that I really hope get the automatic bids, that they win their conference tournaments, and I will be devastated if they do not, and I don't see them in March Madness. The first being number 52, James Madison out of the Sun Belt. They have an amazing record of 27-3, but they've only played 3 games in quads 1 and 2, and they've gone 1-2 in those games. They desperately need to win the Sun Belt Conference Championship, but could they get in if they play all the way to the championship and lose a close game in the final? Probably not, but I'm holding out hope. And then finally, I feel similar about number 56 Grand Canyon in the Western Athletic Conference, the WAC. Again, an amazing record overall, 25-4. 3-3 in quads 1 and 2, so not that many high-quality games. But this is a team that I would hate to see left out of the tournament. Could they get in if they play a close championship game in the WAC championship? Again, probably not, but I will be devastated, and I think a lot of college basketball analysts would be as well, if a team with that great of record was left out of Selection Sunday. So I know that was a lot of numbers, a lot of computations, records, strategies, and paths. But as we get down here in the last week, that's what a lot of people need to focus on and what a lot of these teams need to do. So if you have any questions or need to watch any games this weekend, I will come back next week with a full update of where we are heading in to the major conference tournaments. And we will discuss more at that point what has changed from this week to next. Thank you all for listening, and I hope to hear you again next time. Thank you for listening to the Press Play Podcast Network. To follow us on X, look up Press Play Pods. For sponsorship plans and more information, please email admin@pressplaypodcast.com. And to listen to all our shows and learn more about our network, please visit www.pressplaypodcasts.com.